Stories of the Supernatural. Whether you're watching a video or listening to a podcast, please like and subscribe to us so that you can get notification of when a new show is released. Links to videos or MP3 files can be found on MiamiGhostChronicles.com. Go to MarlenePardo.com for information on new book releases. I narrate several podcast series that can be found on major podcast platforms and can also be listened to via Alexa, Sonos, and other home systems. Look for Supernatural Storytime for scary storytelling, Nightshade Diary for classic horror and adventure stories, Stories of the Supernatural for interviews with different guests on the show. If you want to get noteworthy news about the paranormal world, true crime, conspiracy stories, and anything that is just plain weird, you can visit Strange Than Fiction Stories tab at MiamiGhostChronicles.com or find us on Blogspot. I want to thank you for being part of my audience, and I think you are all wonderful. Hi everybody, it's Marlene with Stories of the Supernatural. How's everybody doing? Good? I'm good. You know, cold weather wimp that I am. I'm putting up with 30-degree weather at night, and even my husband, I do at night because people ask me, how are the chickens doing? What I call the Chicken Rodeo, which is because I put everybody inside the coop even though they want to sleep outside. So yeah, I have to wait till they roost, and then I go out there when it's getting dark, and I call my husband goes, oh, what are you gonna do, the Chicken Rodeo? I said, yeah, let's go do the Chicken Rodeo. So yeah, I have to grab them and put them in there because if not, believe it or not, chickens do get the sniffles, especially because in the coop they don't have the if there's any gusts of wind, even though it's cold, they can huddle together and get warm, and they're okay. And my roosters, they can roost. I have them covered up, but they can roost outside, because if I threw everybody in there, I'd open my coop and I'd have a bunch of quasi dead rooster. No roosters. No, even though outside they get along kind of, inside there, no. But anyway, that's what's happening in the chicken kingdom. As far as, I'm still working on my nemesis. I've got the hawks and the birds of prey, which in winter for some time, they just become more aggressive. A lot more aggressive. I think for some reason is that some of them that have territories nearby, food has become scarcer game, so they widen out the area that they normally hunt in, and that's why I'm getting some of them, that bigger ones that I've never normally see out here. I see a lot of here the smaller ones, the sparrowhawks, things like that. But yeah, so yeah, that's what's been happening in Marlene's world. That I get up and I look at like what's the weather going to be today? What's the weather at night? Because it's like, yeah, Marlene, come sundown, I'd be a hasty retreat. By the way, guys, I'm going to be having a live stream on March 1st, Fat Tuesday, Mardi Gras. Okay, which is the day, this is the big hurrah before you went into the Lent season, which supposedly you were supposed to give up, till the 40 days until Easter. So I'm going to be doing a live stream on March 1st, I'm almost positive, for Mardi Gras. And we're going to talk about all the traditions, going back to Mardi Gras, what it meant, blah, 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 blah. And also, I am going to put out a new show. I know a lot of people had asked me, oh, Marlene, there's a lot of historical places in the area, even some of these older cemeteries. And I'm going to put up something about the author, Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings. She was an author who won the 1939 Pulitzer Prize for her novel, The Yearling. Okay. So look for that, because I paid a visit. Well, no, I'll take it back. I tried to find her where her tombstone is, in this very small, graveyard, and one of those things that happens where I went at sundown, and I could have filmed a horror story there. The dogs start barking, and these cows that they had somewhere started mooing, but from far away. It was like, wow, this is so creepy, Marlene. Really? It's like you couldn't have picked a better time to come out. But anyway, I'll let you guys. You'll see it when I upload it. It's going to be a good show. It's really interesting. I got a lot of interesting stuff about that because she actually lived here, Cross Creek, where she wrote all these novels, like in the 1920s and into the early 1930s, are like 5 miles from where I live. But anyway, let's get on to the good part. The good part is who I have as a guest tonight. And this is the first time this gentleman has been here. His name is Reverend Ronald Feyl Enright. He's a Catholic Archbishop and Chief Exorcist for many independent traditional Catholic jurisdictions since 1982. He's performed over 880,000 rituals involving demonic possession, assessments, and demonic investigations over the past 41 years. Archbishop Enright is the founder of an international organization known as the Order of Exorcists, with clergy members and assessment teams in 24 countries worldwide. He has just released a book in January of 2022, last month, titled Exorcist Secret Journal, Concealed Cases of Diabolical Activities and Demonic Possession, which in truth is really an autobiography of what he's run across in all his years as an exorcist. Help me welcome him tonight. How are you doing, Archbishop?
I'm doing fine, actually. Thank you. Good.
And, you know, we spoke briefly before we started to record, and you mentioned that, well, obviously because of the bio, that you've been doing this work for at least 40 years. But how did you end up there to begin with?
Well, you know, first of all, the thing that I do, it's not like a job. It's not like where you have to apply for something or, you know, and as a child, most of us, you know, the question is, what would you like to be when you grow up? And most kids would say policeman, fireman, Indian chief, whatever. I wanted to be clergy. I wanted to be a priest.
Yeah, well,
that sounds. And it all started by a supernatural event that occurred in my life at a very early age. I was about 10 or 11 years old. And I remember being in the bathroom, taking a shower, and this super bright light just illuminated the entire room for at least a good 30 seconds. And in that time, it was so blinding. I mean, so bright and blinding. I had to close my eyes for that split second. And when I did, I saw what I call a divine vision. I saw myself much older with a Roman collar, you know, it's a clergy shirt, and working in some capacity within the church, not as an exorcist, just as a clergyman.
Okay.
And it came in as if I was watching a movie, and it came in like it just blasted into my mind, and I could see everything. And it was only like for 30 seconds, but in that 30 seconds, it altered my path, my journey in life, if you will. As I got older, of course, I made some inquiries and went to school, you know, the Catholic institution and all this stuff. And then I when I finally received holy orders, that's what it's called when you're ordained into the priesthood. It's called holy orders. And at that time, I consulted with my jurisdictional bishop, and I asked him about the ministry of exorcism. And there was only one bishop at that time who was actually an experienced exorcist. And what he had to do is assign me to this bishop who became my mentor. And I trained under him for 4 years.
Okay.
And, you know, I am the assistant to the exorcist for 4 years. And in those 4 years, wow, I could write a series of books on just those 4 years. But I will tell you that in 1982, I was consecrated.
How old were you in your 20s during those 4 years? Okay.
I was in my mid 20s.
Okay.
And so as a result, in 1981, I was it's called bishop elect. It's just one step before being consecrated into a full bishop. In 1982, I was consecrated, and within that time, because of some of my clinical training, I decided to design a questionnaire and an approach for people that are claiming symptoms of any type of demonic issue, especially possession. So I designed a clinical form which consists of 60 questions. And in those questions, we have to determine whether or not we are dealing with someone who actually has a demonic issue, or if it's some form of psychosis.
Okay.
So, there's a very fine line there, because there are some mental illnesses that could actually mimic possession, what we think is possession.
Right.
And so it's very, very, it's very critical that we get this right. So,
when I want to ask you a quick question.
sure.
During those 4 years that you were training under this exorcist, did you ever witness anything that you thought that gave you pause to reconsider?
No, reason being is I had a calling, a divine calling when I was
Okay.
10 or 11. So I knew I was on a path. I was on a journey that was already sketched out for me, predetermined already.
Okay.
And as a result, I just followed the path.
Okay.
And as a result, I've seen a lot of shocking things. I've seen
Right. I guess that's what was my
people.
question.
I've
You're
seen
young and you're like, wow.
Oh yeah, and not really. Well, experiencing the first supernatural event at a young age, that was like the trigger, because after that, I started noticing and seeing things that I've just basically took for granted when I was younger. I started looking at the details of life
Okay.
and studying people and things and questioning certain things that were, mysterious and somewhat supernatural. And I just kept digging until I got the right answers.
Okay.
This was like a long time ago.
Right. Because, I've heard that, there's priests that want to be priests, but the exorcism thing, they're like, no, 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 no. They just, how can I say it? I don't know if it's a question of faith or personality, or there's something in their makeup, just like you were so positive this was what it is for you. In other words, it's not for everybody, right?
There's two types of scenarios. Okay.
Okay.
They are, one is a person who wants to seek training and become the ultimate goal, or whatever they want to be. They have to train to be that particular, or in that particular position. And then the second category is the person who is called, and as a result, that calling becomes gifted. The same thing in medicine. You have physicians that are very skilled, and they are considered gifted. Then you have physicians that are just so. They just go through the motions. They don't have the commitment that should be there, or the drive, and things in this nature. So you always have those two that coexist.
Okay.
Because I like to think I'm on the ladder, where I was called to do this. So it was not like it's not like a job, that I had to fill an application in and applied for. It was an actual calling.
And I'm thinking maybe that's why they trained you for 4 years. So it was like, this is like, we're going to give you enough time to, if you go forward, you're sure about what you're going to do.
Well, one of the main things involved in this whole scenario is that we're actually dealing with demonic entities. So there's an actual real war going on between good and evil. And the good has to be there along with the evil. They both have to coexist in order to know one from the other. They both have to be there. And as a result, when we go to the darkness, when we talk about darkness and diabolical things that affect everyone at one point in time, when that happens, you have to be certain that, especially if you're the assessor, you have to make sure that you're dealing with the actual, real, genuine article. You have to make sure that it's a true demonic issue and not a psychological. There are other categories too. There are people that like to. There are people in our society that want attention, and so they'll do anything to achieve that attention. Or other things, that borderline psychosis, where they actually think that they're experiencing something supernatural, and in reality, it's just a chemical imbalance that's taking place. So they're not sure of what's real and what isn't. And then you have that category where it's actually genuine, where you are witnessing a person that is not only levitating, but you're seeing that his skin or her skin is being transformed to something that would resemble a deceased person.
Wow.
The skin is always a gray tone, cold to the touch, and it actually looks like you're dealing with a cadaver, because The whole appearance is just like if you're dealing with that kind of scenario. So it's very interesting. But what makes it more critical in terms of being called to this kind of ministry is that if you should make a miscalculation and say, okay, the person says he's possessed, maybe he's possessed. Well, let's just do an exorcism. Let's just do a ritual. You do that, and if the person has no demonic issues, but rather has some form of psychosis, and he has this delusion that you're feeding into, then what you could do is you could be pushing that individual further into their psychosis, which could lead to suicide.
Right. They start believing it themselves, in other words.
Yeah.
Because the idea has been presented to them.
Because
of course, they're mentally ill. So now they start, like, especially if it comes from an authority figure, it's like, oh, I am? Yeah, I could see where that could be a big problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I've trained my clergy. I have probably over 1,000 clergy worldwide that actually have a ministry of exorcism, where they're the bishop, they're the jurisdictional bishop for that, whether it be parish or city, town, whatever. But they are in charge, and they have a team that will actually do the assessment before the clergy even gets involved. The jurisdictional bishop has to review the psychological reports, the medical reports of the individual, because medical and physical can mimic certain symptoms of demonic possession. So we have to see what the psychiatry community would say about their psychological evaluation. In my organization, we've had 3 psychiatrists. And what they would do is they would interpret the actual report, the psychological report, and see whether or not there's something there that may indicate that there's something beyond the norm. Okay. And if that be the case, they can make a decision as to whether or not it's an actual mental issue or if it's actually something that they can't explain. Then they would shoot the report to me, their recommendations, and then I would look at the investigators' reports. The investigators, they go out to these various locations that have requested our services. We send out a team to go out there. They would interview the individual and the household members. And while they're doing this, they'll be using my questionnaire that I designed, 40 years ago or so. So they're using the questionnaire. And the questionnaire is, it sums up in 3 different categories. The physical, of course, the health issues, and the manifestations that might be going on in the house. So we have a series of questions in those 3 categories. And so as they're asking the questions, the individual who is making the claim of being possessed or experiencing some type of supernatural event due to demonic influences, they would actually react and respond to each question. And while this is happening, one of the team would be operating a camera, which would be taping everything. Now, see, everything is done remotely, and from my point of view, because these assessments could be coming from around the world. I mean, I have people in the Philippines, and I have people in Poland, in Europe, and as a result, they would send their reports to me. And that would be their investigation reports, which are assessment reports. They would send the questionnaire. I would examine that. I would examine their mental and physical health based on the reports that would be accompanied with the assessment reports, which I forward to our psychiatrists. And they give me their recommendations. And then the ultimate decision would fall on my shoulders. So I would look at all the evidence and then, of course, through this thing that we call discernment, we know it's a spiritual form of decision that comes from a higher authority. I could make that decision as to whether or not, and then I would make my recommendations to the jurisdictional bishop. Now, I'm somewhat semi-retired now, so I claim. Yes. And so I've been doing this for over 41 years.
I'm thinking, how do you retire from that? It's like, no, I don't think
you don't really retire from it. I still get the emails from people requesting, services. I still get requests from clergy asking my input on something that they may suspect could be of a demonic issue, things of this nature. So it's still an ongoing thing. And so as a result, this background is my office, actually.
Okay.
Even I'm semi-retired, I still have an office that
Of
I
course.
maintain. And as a result, when things come in, I have to read everything. I mean, all the daily emails, and you probably have the same thing, I'm sure.
Well, you know what? I think, they even talk about it with different types of jobs. Retirement, it's like, I think we all need a purpose, but especially with something that sounds like it's your passion, you just can't say, okay, from this day on, I'm retired. It's like, forget it. No, it's like, you can't. All that knowledge. Nah,
I tried doing that so many times.
Okay, there's always going to be a phone call from somebody who's going to call you and say, look, this is a special case. We need your help. We need your expertise.
I've got a lot of criticism saying nobody could retire from what you do. I mean,
exactly.
And then, and then you have, the trolls that will jump on board and say, oh, what are you doing? You're just, the thing is, I have, in all my 41 years, I have never asked for a penny for any of our services.
That's incredible.
Our services are
people
free.
Don't realize.
Yeah. And the reason they have to be free is if you want to be effective when you do your rituals, you have to make sure you have the endorsement of God. And in the scripture, it says, freely given, freely received, freely received, freely given. We're given the ability to heal through this form of ministry. And in order to have God's endorsement, we have to make sure that we're doing and trying to follow exactly the way it's supposed to be. So when we say
no, you can't. It's even in the prep work, it has to be. I can imagine. Let me ask you: have you ever had any team scared? Like, it's like they're calling you up. It's like, yeah, hey, that report you're gonna get, because I imagine maybe some of these attachments, or there's any type of demonic infestation or whatever. They're like, let's get rid of these people. We're gonna scare them out of here. Have you ever had a team that happened to them?
Oh, yes. I've had new clergy that have said, oh, I don't think, and as a result, you see, every clergy that joins my organization, I ask them to tell me a story. Tell me the story about you being called divinely to do this ministry. And if they can't give me a story, then the odds are they didn't have a calling. You have to have a story. You have to have, as I was telling you about my calling, 10, 11 years old, I could remember like it was yesterday. And I could even go into more detail about that. The point is that they need to have the same kind of story or something similar to it, showing that it was a supernatural divine calling. And as a result, then, of course, it's, as you said earlier, there's a lot of priests, a lot of bishops, a lot of clergy that will shy away from this kind of ministry because of, number one, actually, there's a number of reasons. The number one is they may not believe that it's actually real. They might believe, well, because we have psychiatry now, we could explain everything, and as a result, so maybe 100 years ago they did exorcisms and they did all these things many years ago. But the reality is, that even though we have modern science and we could actually dissect a person's thoughts in regards to what they're trying to articulate and see whether or not, it has any substance to it. Even with all that, the main issue is what happened in the very beginning. I mean, to that individual, was he persuaded because of chemical imbalance, or was it actually a demonic oppression? It's just something that we could talk about. All of us have been subject at one time or another to demonic oppression. That's when the darkness will put an element in your mind, and it would be a negative element. And you start seeing yourself doing things that are, very nice, like maybe stealing or lying, or doing something that's not, that would not be considered wholesome. And as a result, you think, and you never question that it comes from a darkness, because you think it's part of your personality, and as a result, you're just expressing it. But you see, this is what the darkness does. The demonic will actually plant a seed in your mind and will allow you to think that it's your own thoughts. And as a result, it could lead to, like stealing a pencil, to maybe committing a homicide, maybe performing a rape, maybe becoming a serial killer. And
Right.
that seed will continue to grow. In a lot of situations, demonic oppression will lead to demonic possession.
Right.
Then there's other types of elements that we have to be aware of, such as there's a demonic infestation, which is very common. Demonic infestation is when there is dark forces that have been invited into your space, whether it be in a house
Okay.
or wherever you're at. Okay, and
Okay.
as a result, you've invited it. Some people say, well, use a Ouija board, or that might bring it in. But the point is, it's not the Ouija board; it's your intent. When you and what motivates you. If you openly invite something from the dark side to come into your realm of reality, and you're going to have all kinds of problems.
Yes.
And then that's what we call a demonic infestation. That's when the house or wherever you're at is infested with entities that come from, obviously, the darkness. When that
Okay.
happens, all kinds of things could happen within the home. Things could start moving. There might be growling sounds, breaking glass when there's no breaking glass. There might be horrible stenches, smells, odors. You might even feel to a point where you're being physically assaulted. That is either pushed or scratched or bitten or bruises or things of this nature.
Right.
I have a lot of things online in regards to a lot of articles I've written and pictures online
Okay.
of footprints that I've had on me where I've been kicked by invisible entities. Yeah.
Wow. And you know what? I think that's I mean, for people that think like you said, this is how can I say it? It's more imagination than anything else. How can you deny physical evidence of when you're being attacked, like actually attacked? Or like you said, that you see somebody levitating. That you're like, okay, I don't care how crazy you could be. Let's say you're one of these that wants to put it under the umbrella of mental illness. There's no mental illness that I know of that allows you to levitate. It's like, hello, like that. It just doesn't work that way.
Which brings us into a whole different area of discussion, if you like. I've met David Copperfield about 30 years ago in San Diego. He has what people might call an illusion. It's more of a deception, if anything else, where he could actually fly. He could levitate. And then he'll demonstrate that there are no strings, there's no smoke and mirrors. It's the real thing. Right. And then the question comes to, I've seen many people with his talent. Chris Angel, I think, is another one well known.
Yes, I know who you're talking about.
A lot of people, that are unbelievable musicians. They do things and things just appear out of nowhere. They open their hands and a deck of cards will appear or a coin or something. I was about 3 feet away. I was in Pasadena in California, and I was watching a show that was hosted by the Japanese community, and they were musicians that were able to actually wear this complete mask and attire, and they could turn their head, and then another mask and appearance would go right on them. It's like impossible. I was only 3 feet away from the actual performers, and there was no way in the world that could actually be happening unless it was of a supernatural nature. Okay. Again, like I said, this is another discussion. There are people, who have made an arrangement with the darkness.
Here we go. Yeah.
In regards to what they want in their life, if they want the ability to be wiser, to be have a more magnetism, and in regards to social magnetism, or maybe they want something, abilities to do things, read minds, be telepathic, do things that scientists would say is impossible. Right. Even though science does acknowledge that psychokinesis is a real thing. Sure. That is, psychokinesis is the objects that are moving from one point to another point. They're moving by themselves only through the mind. You're able to move things with your mind. Now, there's been a lot of people that try to debunk this, but actually it's genuine. People, there are certain people that are gifted. Now, I don't know if they're gifted or if they just simply develop the ability to do it just through concentration. And over the years, you're able to move things with your mind, which is referred to as psychokinesis. But getting back on point, okay. What was the point?
No. This is the thing that you were saying, and like, well, because I said levitation, and then you talked about certain magicians, and I understand that a lot of it is the illusion, whether it's, especially nowadays, whether it's mirrors or just the angle. There's a variety of ways that.
I think my main point was it's real magic. It's real magic.
Right, that there, it's as much as they want to make it look like it can be. It's, in other words, that it's totally. That there is no, how can I, supernatural in the magic. How's that? That it's just that there's such a great magician that their sleight of hand can fool you. But I understand what you're saying, that in certain, maybe with certain people, for that ultimate magic trick.
Yeah, you see a lot of them in Las Vegas who are very wealthy, and I think there's a reason for that. Interesting enough, okay, there are famous people that have died in the 40s and 50s, and they had incredible talent, whether they're singers, performers, whatever, but they're famous people and they died early in life, even comedians. And I think a lot has to do with a supernatural arrangement they made with the darkness in order to be successful. They had to trade something. They had to do something and trade in order to gain those abilities. So I'm right.
It was like that quid pro quo.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm going to give you this fame and fortune or whatever, everything, but you're not going to, like, it's only going to be good for X. And then I don't know if you've heard of the 27 Club, which is many musical artists that died when they were 27. And there's always been that thing very similar to what you're describing. They reached like their peak of their fame very young, and then they died. Some of them suicide, others drug overdoses, others weird accidents.
Yeah.
Something similar.
I'm a firm believer. I have another hypothesis in regards to, in the same lines. First of all, the old cliche about there's no such thing as a free situation. Okay, everybody's accountable, and there's always a price to pay. Okay, a lot of these creative people have made deals with the darkness, and as a result, they were able to excel in terms of their abilities, whether it be magic, which could be, like I said, totally an illusion, because it could be actually real magic. They will probably do whatever they can to make it look like it's like on the line there, but they'll have the showmanship like the fellow I mentioned. I don't want to mention any famous names,
but I can't wig out my audience too much if I do something that's like totally impossible, because then it'll be like secret will be out.
But
you see some things, and you're thinking, especially when sometimes in your case, which was great because you're saying you were 3 feet away from that performance, and when you see it on television, you're thinking, well, man, this could be anything. God knows there's a lot of, nowadays cameras and things, but when you see it 3 feet away from the person, it's like, okay, there's a part of me that's saying this is not possible.
Yeah. So help me God. I'm telling you, I was right there 3 feet away from the performers, and I was like right in the first row. It was like just chairs they had folded, and we were like, it was at one of the museums, an Asian museum in Pasadena. But I couldn't believe that I was really studying this person. As I said, from childhood, I've always been an observer. I call myself a profiler. And in fact, I happen to have an online, course, for clergy in regards to what we're talking about. The reason being is that there's so much out there that people are totally oblivious to until they fall into it. Just think of the horrors that would be if you happen to walk into a situation where perhaps some kind of seance or ritual going on, and it's all leaning towards the dark side, and you just happen to be caught up into it, and then it's funny thing about the game Ouija boards, the very first thing, the first question that the person always asks is there anyone there? And who are you? And now, if that's not an invitation, I don't know what is.
I have no idea and
Yeah.
and I've mentioned it in my previous shows. I said sometimes you don't have to be the person with the fingers on the planchette. You can be the person in the corner looking, and you can get targeted.
It's exactly
Everybody thinks that you have to be the one doing the, hey, it's one, and all you have to be is like, oh, I was just watching. It's like you can get targeted for any reason, weak link, something
right.
going on with you personally, any addiction, anything. It could be anything.
Right.
Maybe even present time problems where it's like I don't care about these two dummies pushing the planchette. You are the ones that's going to become the target. That's why I tell people don't think that it's just that you're safe just because you don't actually participate in that. Yeah. And one of the things I wanted to ask you, Archbishop, those people that you say, is that something that you could call a perfect possession, where these people say, you don't have to possess me as in, how can I say, take me over, like without me noticing. I'm willing. I just, like you said, let's make a deal. Be my wingman, and I will do whatever you want.
Yes, they make themselves open. I mean, and the thing is that there are so many ears that are listening, and I don't mean physical human ears. I'm talking about the demonic. They're just waiting for you to say something stupid like that. I always get a kick when I watch these programs, and you have the investigators. They go into a haunted house, and and one guy is this idiot shouting out, "If you're there, prove it. Do something,
God.
show me
Every
something."
time
And I'm going, my gosh. I mean, this is like this is all entertainment here.
No, I know.
Nothing real here, but yet in the same token, by doing that, they're opening themselves up anyway. Like after the cameras are down, and they walk away from the location, who knows? There might be some kind of attachment that might be with them as a result because of their foolish actions. And so, I look at this. I wanted to say one other thing about Ouija boards. Yes. Ouija boards and other elements that are used to play these games and who invite the darkness or the dead into their space. Do you know that the Ouija board itself does not actually call any of these dark entities into your space? The Ouija board is just a point of interest. It's a tool that could be used to open up the door to the darkness. The Ouija board itself is just a cardboard. I mean, it's just a game. But if you have the intent to use that game to open up a portal, to open up some entry point to the other side, then the odds are it's going to happen. And when it happens, you're going to regret it. Because then you need to look for somebody that has an organization like the one I created.
Right. So many years. And people don't realize that it's as simple sometimes as that.
Yeah.
Being present, at some place where, and like you said, some people play around with that and basically they see it as a game, but there's other people that have very dark intentions. Yeah. And when they're, in other words, like you said, their intent is just not to call in the dead. They're looking for non-human entities to come in versus the regular dead person. How's that? And let me, and because I did paranormal investigations since the 1990s, and I would tell people, you could go to an investigation where you might have, a ghost. I'm going to say ghost as in a human, a deceased human being or whatever. But you could also have a non-human entity masquerading or pretending to be human. How's that? They even pretend sometimes to be Uncle Jim or the little girl that, oh, she's so sweet. My God, it's just a little kid, poor little kid. It's like, you have to be really, really careful.
Absolutely true. In fact, that's one of the Satan's biggest tools in his toolbox is to deceive you. And in that deception, he will create whatever you think or hold, whatever's precious to you, maybe it's someone who's passed on, he will create the images in your mind and heart, and it will manifest physically right before you. And you'd swear that you're actually talking to a deceased loved one when you're actually talking to something from the darkness. I wanted to say also another thing too. Paranormal investigators and paranormal groups, um, and I have a lot of them in my organization. They've come in to do something different. A paranormal group will actually pick a location and investigate it, and prove whether or not there's something there.
Right.
And the owner of that house or whatever it is should be alerted as to there's something here. It's
Right.
not just imagination. Okay, but most, in fact, all cases, at least to my knowledge, paranormal groups, they go looking for places that are haunted, that are things of this nature.
Right. Yeah. It depends on their format. And
Now you see, now our organization, we don't look for anything like that.
right.
They come to us. They
Yes.
come to us with with their issues, whether it be something flying in the house, or they suspect somebody in their household may be going through some periods, some dark periods, perhaps even demonic issues.
Yes.
And as a result, that's how we're called in. So we have all these people calling in. I still get requests, as I said, from around the world asking.
Right.
And I have to explain to them. In fact, most recently, it was just across the country on your coast, and I'm on the West Coast. So, I'm telling this person, and I'm communicating with all these people that ask for help, because I always do. On Facebook, I have, like, I don't know, 10 forums. And
Okay.
manage the 10 forums. That's what I do in my retirement. I'm answering questions and get in and actually giving some input. But I was actually explaining to this fellow on the other side of our country that I'm in California. I mean, I can't
Right.
get and do things I used to do when I was in my 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s. Do you know I have a birthday in about 3 days from now? And
Happy birthday.
be 69 years old.
Wow. Happy
Yeah.
birthday.
Never thought I'd reach 69. But anyway, it's a good number. 70 is going to be a challenge.
Well, you know what? Nowadays, what is it that they say? The 60s is the new 40s. What was it? Something like that?
Yeah. Well, they say you're as old as you feel, right? So
Exactly.
I have to be honest with you. Sometimes I feel pretty old.
No, believe me, there's days that you're like, oh my God, my knees. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's like, man, going down these 3 steps didn't used to bother me that much before.
I always say that, the way you see people, your perception of people, can be different than the way other people look at you or them. I don't know if you could follow this, but sometimes you look at a person, you're not really looking at them per se, but you're looking at their personality. You're looking at how you feel about them. They become very special to you. So, the age thing doesn't even exist, because you're dealing with somebody that you really like to communicate with or be with. And so it's a totally different scenario. But then there are people that just, like to read the cover and don't take the time to look in the book and check out the pages.
Well, you know what? It's it's really funny, because when you look at some of these movies or sitcoms, let's say from the 80s, you look at how they portrayed people that they're in their 60s, and they were making them look ancient. You know what I'm saying? It's like, that's not.
I know, it's amazing.
That's
like
not the
Golden
60s
Girls,
of today.
The Golden Girls is a perfect example.
Yeah.
With the grandmother.
Estelle Getty, which played the mother of
That's the same age as the daughter, but you never know, because
they made her look like but it was but it's like God, I can't remember the author's name. He's a doctor. He wrote this book, I want to say, like 10 years ago, and he was talking about how society, and we buy into it, by the way, society puts these expectations as you age, that, okay, if you're this age, this is how you'll behave, how you'll dress, how you'll feel, and we buy into it because, If we're in society, you're in society. And it's like a universal societal overview that as you have this age, this is what you should be doing or not doing. And he says all of this is made up. There's nothing that says
there's always a
this is what
subliminal
you're going
message.
to feel or anything like that.
There's a subliminal message in every
Yes.
advertising commercial you listen to. And
Absolutely.
in time, when it's said to you over and over again, you start believing it and you buy the product. And so, yes, that's exactly right. Exactly what you said is absolutely true. Yeah.
A lot of people feel things like I just said, oh, my knees hurt because, when you get a certain age, you start getting like arthritis, right? And then you have to stop and think. And it's exactly like what you said. Especially the way subconscious works. And I understand the way the subliminal messages work and how much, how can I say? So your subconscious is always recording everything. And you could see a commercial and even the beats of music, which put you in a hypnotic trance, where what you're picking up on a subconscious level is much more than what you think you are.
Absolutely true.
It's inferred. It depends on the person's suggestibility, et cetera, et cetera. But yes, I understand exactly what you mean. And I tell everybody when I used to have clients, they would say, I would give them little recordings to relax. And they would say, Marlene, well, I don't have to come back. I said, I hope you keep on listening to the recording. I said, because this is continual, whether it's an advertiser for a car or whatever, or nowadays for a big pharma.
Yeah.
Do you have this? Do you have that? Well, if the drug doesn't kill you, we can fix you. We continuously get all these feedback about how you should feel at a certain age.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's incredible. One of the things that I wanted to ask you, and since you've been doing this for so long, when I used to be more active, I used to work for a foundation here that ran in Florida. And one of the things that attracted me to it is that first it would do a scientific approach, exactly like what you described. Are we talking, is this legitimate? Is there mental illness, or somebody? And I tell everybody, I remember back in the 90s, by the time I got called in, which before I even worked with the foundation, there was truly not a good portion of the time, there was really, truly something going on. People were at their rope's end. They had already called the electrician, the plumber, sometimes the clergy, depends, They had run out of options, and they were like, usually you got called like a person that knows a person, please come over, very quiet, shh. And these people were like at their rope's end. And I say nowadays with all these paranormal shows, they hear a strange noise and everybody runs out and sleeps in the car. And I don't know if you've run across that, where this advent of the paranormal shows, everybody thinks everything is a ghost. It's like, slow down. Because I think that sometimes people don't realize you don't want this.
Yeah.
You do not want it to be a supernatural agent. It'd rather be more preferable that you have to do electrical work on your house or replace plumbing.
Very good.
And the reason why I say this, I went on a few investigations where you were telling the people in the house, there's nothing paranormal here. We think this is this and this. And they were like, no, they wanted to have
of course.
A paranormal thing going on.
The whole thing. This is why we have assessments, and we interview these individuals, and we not only investigate them, but we also investigate their house, the history, of that, things of this nature. An ideal assessment team in my organization would have not only people that are good communicators, but also and open-minded, but also to be very critical and to be have the will show me and prove me type of scenario or attitude. They have to be, there's one person that should be a cameraman. The second person should be a carpenter or maybe electrician. A third person should be maybe a nurse or somebody in the medical field.
Right.
And the fourth person could be the lead, who would be conducting the first contact interview, this type of scenario. The reason you have these other traits that should be part of the team is because you have to examine everything. As you said, it could be electrical problem. It could be black mold in the house or even in the basement can, over a period of time, can actually cause hallucinations.
EMFs, high EMF readings will also produce a lot of weird sensations in your brain.
Very good. That's right. Good for you. I mean, you have good knowledge there.
Yeah,
a
so
lot of
I've
people.
been to a lot of things
That's
that I've told people. My audience has heard my stories along the way. I've gone to places and then it's like if it wasn't that right spooky, it was kooky. It was like what? Okay, things like that, and um, my boys, my teenage boys, I would take them on a couple of when we went to like this historical place in that cases. They had a laughing. They had a running joke between them that would say, everybody, something, the ghost pops out, everybody's running away, and here's mom going, "Hey, look," because that was like a little bit, it's like, okay, well, but that's what I'm here for. But yeah, but I have seen darker stuff that is that people sometimes don't realize what they want or what they're pursuing, exactly where it leads. How's that?
Yeah.
And so let me ask you, here you went, you were you did that apprenticeship for 4 years, and then what would happen? Let's say if that team went out and they said, yes, we've interviewed, we've found all this and evidence, and then that's when, at what point you stepped in then to do the actual exorcism, or how does that work?
When I have the psychological and physical reports of the individual, and I could rule those things out, and when I have the assessment reports along with the video in regards to the first contact interview, when I have all that information along with, as I said, our medical recommendations, then I can make a valid, true, hopefully right on decision in regards to whether or not we should pursue an actual formal ritual of exorcism. If it's a jurisdictional bishop that's asking me for my opinion in regards to all the stuff I just mentioned, then I would review it and then I would give them my opinion. Then the jurisdictional bishop would make the decision to get their team together and to do an actual ritual of exorcism. But to do that, that's the last resort. I mean, you have to make sure that there's no other issues involved. If we know it's a genuine case, well, then we have to pursue it as such.
And what about family members that are in the same household?
People that live in the same household where there's actually a genuine demonic involvement involved, they experience what's referred to as traumatic sensation within their very being, because they're actually affected of everything that's going on. Okay, it could be their mother, their sister, their brother that might be actually demonstrating supernatural events that are taking place, where things are moving in their room, where their skin is opening up because, and then sores start appearing, or burn marks, or even spontaneous fires may occur in the room itself.
Wow.
For no apparent reason. When those things happen, everyone in the household will be affected. In fact, for that matter, even the team that goes and actually investigates and actually does the actual assessment, a lot of them will experience physical things that may take place, such as bleeding noses.
Really?
I've had many reports of some of my teams that have actually experienced running, bleeding noses as a result.
Wow.
Yeah, there are, of course, the scratches and stuff like that. I don't pay too much mind to that per se, because that could happen, in any event. In any case. I mean, you're brushing up against an unfamiliar environment, so you might brush up and actually get the scratches, and then think that it's something supernatural, something that appeared, and it's very diabolical, but it might be explainable. When I see bite marks, in places where the skin,
it's impossible for somebody to bite themselves.
Right, and it's done in the back, or their buttocks has been bitten, literally bitten, and they're living by themselves, and this is happening, and
yeah, it's like how's that going to happen?
How is that happening? And then that's one of the many things that you have to look twice and say, okay, there's something going on here.
Let me ask you, when you take that,
go ahead.
When you take the history of this person, let's say like the assessment, do you take into consideration childhood trauma, either physical, emotional, sexual?
Yeah, so that falls all into the psychological profile of the individual.
Okay.
Okay, and that's their upbringing and their environment and stuff like that.
Mhm.
The investigators do what's referred to even before making the first contact interview. Our lead investigators will first do research on the individual, find
Okay.
out if there's anything that's been published, okay, online or anywhere else, so where newspapers, so on, about individual being involved in a crime, maybe suspected of some foul play, or maybe an individual was made a scene. And there was one individual, in fact, in Florida, actually, when I think about it, a few years
Mhm.
back,
Okay.
where there was an individual that bit off somebody's face and was actually eating the flesh of an individual.
Yes.
And they were saying that the
Yeah.
person was had bath salt, he had the
Bath
influence.
salts, exactly. He
I'm
was a
sorry,
homeless man and supposedly had taken some
that
bath
was
salts.
yeah, yeah. You see,
Yeah, I
I
remember
call
that case. That was horrific.
yeah, very much so. Drugs like that, and any drug, any substance abuse, can actually lower your defenses and make demonic oppression become very prevalent. Okay, in an individual, at least you can see the manifestations based because they lowered their guard, and as a result, they allowed themselves to be open mind, in terms of their mind and allowing these darkness
Right.
things to take place. When I
Yeah.
when I first read that story, I said that's a perfect example. The same thing with the various famous serial killers. Okay, they all have an
Mhm.
interesting commonality there, and sometimes you could see it in their eyes. You can also see it in their behavior, and they seem to almost mimic each other because it's all
Mhm.
part of the same scenario. This demonic oppression, demonic possession is that's up to another level where you're not really able to control what you're doing, but you do have periods where you come down and you can actually be yourself for a little time, and then it will come over again, and you'll become possessed. That is the personality of the demonic entity will become manifested within that individual. And then what you see then is no longer the human being, but you see a demonic entity actually playing out physically within the host, within the body that they've possessed.
Mhm.
And then you'll start seeing other things. That's where the flesh turns to a grayish and cold type of scenario, where cold to the touch. And even various spots and sections in the house will actually change because of their presence. Everyone in the household is affected. Everyone sees what's going on. They know it's real. A lot of them are frightened. A lot of them
Sure.
will have psychological will after effects as a result of being exposed to these incredible, horrific things. And so, yeah, this stuff is really real. When you're ready, let me know. I'll tell you a really interesting story that happened where I almost lost my life. And this was,
I'm going to ask you about that, but first I want to ask you before I forget, since
oh, yeah,
you're from
sure.
New York,
Yes.
you were there during the Son of Sam murders, I take it, right?
I left New York
Ninth-
I left New York in the 70s.
Okay.
Like
Okay.
70s, 71, 72.
I wasn't sure. And I
Yeah.
was going to ask you because you know that they wrote a book saying that Berkowitz wasn't the only one. There was a group of Satanists who
Yeah.
have perpetrated. And I think, have you ever had a case where it's somebody that was a Satanist and now is trying to get out of it
Yeah.
and ask you for help?
Yes. 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 In fact, the majority, well, I'm not going to say majority. I'll say there is a portion of the people who have asked for my assistance
Right.
in the past years who have been. In fact, there's one very famous psychic that came to me and had some major problems, and she's was on TV and she wrote some books and so on, and she came to me with her terrible nightmares. She used to have horrific, I mean, horrible, dark nightmares, and so much so that it was taking over her life. And there were certain things that she would find herself doing,
Okay.
which is totally out of her character, and she knew something was wrong, especially when she started cutting herself. And then, of course, this could also fall under mental illness. And, but something has to drive you to that point to do that, to actually injure
Yeah.
yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when she came to me, and 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 she literally swore me to secrecy in regards to her identity because she's a famous person, and
Mm-hmm.
she's passed away a few years ago now. But I still hold that confidentiality. There are
Sure.
psychics. There are people that are that were full-blooded Satanists, and they're
Mm-hmm.
part of the covenant and stuff like that, and they find themselves where they have a moment of clarity where they say,
Mm-hmm.
"Holy cow, what am I doing?" or what is this all about? Or maybe a multiple series of confusions where they're just totally, they just need answers, and so those people would come to us. So
And the
yeah,
reason why I mentioned the son of Sam was, he's totally done a reverse. He found Christ in church, he's never going to get out. He totally admitted his participation in the murders, and he's basically runs like a ministry from what I understand inside the prison. I don't know if he's in Sing Sing anymore, but anyway. And there was a gentleman, he passed away also, Maury Terry, who wrote a book based on his research and interviews, that apparently some of these murders were, he did some of them, but they were basically like Satanists trying to do human sacrifices.
yeah,
And it's really funny because it's almost like Berkowitz, the spy, he got saved. He's in jail. He got saved. He's still alive. But some of the suspects that they think participated, they all died weird ways
yeah.
right after he got arrested, and I'm thinking to myself, you almost want to say that he got saved because he got arrested, even though he was, you know what I'm saying? Because everybody surrounding him that had some tie-in ended up being murdered. It wasn't like, oh, they had a heart attack and died. These were all young people, and they died kind of horrifically. And I'm thinking to myself, at some point, if you participated willingly, in other words, like you said, this is not like you were at the wrong place at the wrong time. You actually volunteered and you did satanic rites. How do you backtrack out of that? And I'm thinking, man, you need to call somebody like you, the big guns, like, get me out of this, help me.
A lot of times it lands in suicide. A lot of people
Oh
that
boy,
volunteer
yeah.
will do a suicide type of scenario. And most of the time,
Okay.
it's not them that are asking for help, but maybe a close relative that says, I have a niece or brother or son, who has this problem. What can you do for us? That type of thing. As I said, there's a lot of legwork involved. Any organization that says, "Well, we'll do an exorcism if you say you're possessed," I would not go to an organization like that. First of all, if they haven't done the legwork and they haven't done eliminating, the obvious, and if they haven't done that, and the odds are that whatever they do, all I can say is God bless the victims, because they'll either be successful in what they're doing or not. It could push them over the edge. And that's why I say it's important.
Yeah, I can see where speaking to the wrong person could make it a lot worse.
Oh, yes.
A lot worse. And what about that case that you mentioned before, that you said that you almost lost your life?
Yeah. And this was horrible. I mean, it was incredible. And documented too. In 2013, after an assessment, my team gave me the evidence, and the psychological reports came in. And all this, the whole process takes about 6 months, sometimes less. It depends on who is willing to actually do the psychological evaluation and have a physical, because that's very important. So after examining all the assessment reports, the recommendations from our medical people, I made a decision that I would do it myself, since it was local. It was in Southern California. So I said, okay, I'm going to, do it myself. And of course, I had a team of about 8 people that were more of a supportive group, if not anything. I think 3 of them were part of the first initial assessment group, the investigation group. But anyway, I had about 8 people around me. and I was doing this ceremony, and I talked earlier about the blood, coming from the nose of people who were just
Mm-hmm.
in the room. But there's also other things that could happen, like one of the people around us, one of the investigators, he had actually his arm was torn from his wrist down to his elbow. It just opened up, and he just bled like he was going to
Oh.
bleed out. And it was, obviously a time of concern when that happened. Anytime anyone sheds any blood, especially if they're not part of the ritual, they're just standing there. It's very concerning.
Yeah.
So I'm in the middle of the circle, and the individual is there, and I am doing my thing, going through the actual ritual. Right at that particular time, I felt something that was, it felt horrible. It felt like a 2x4. And someone swinging, full swing, 2x4, right to the left side of my body. And not only once, but 3 times. Sometimes 3 has an interesting,
Yeah.
very relative, because it's a mockery that
Yes.
the darkness does. Anyway, 3 pounds of this invisible 2x4 just went right across my rib cage. I have the prayer book in one hand, and at that point, I think I had holy water in the other, and I started losing my breath, and I fell over a little bit, and able to get up. The pain was so incredible; it just took my breath away. I continued the actual ritual, and after several hours later, we were done, but I could hardly catch my breath. And so, as I was being one of my people that drove me home, I just couldn't breathe very well. So I contacted my family physician, and he said, "Well, let's see what's going on." And went to the hospital, took an X-ray, and some other tests, and they found something really incredibly interesting. They found that I had a 2-liter sack of blood wrapped around my heart,
Oh.
coming from this side of my body, with the left side where I was struck.
Right.
Okay. And the reason I wasn't breathing normally is because the blood sac was expanding and leaning on my lungs, and that's the reason I couldn't breathe.
Right. Yeah, your cardiovascular
So
system.
they did an operation, and then I had 3 operations that were all related. They had to, no, and it's interesting too, because in this operation I was semi-conscious, and they were performing it. I was like in this big donut, it's a CAT scan, and the doctors were there, and they were operating on me and releasing the blood, and I was like semi-awake, and I could actually see what was going on.
Okay.
And one of the technicians said, "Oh, do you want to see the amount of blood?" And they actually showed me. It was a big bottle of dark blood. So it's interesting that I remember that. But anyway, I had 2 procedures after that, and I was in the hospital, San Antonio Regional Health Center in Upland, California, and I was in there for 30 days.
30 days?
30 days, yeah. First, they couldn't figure out how I succumbed to that condition. I mean, they couldn't understand. After the first week, they got the health department involved. The CDC came. The head of CDC came, and he had to do an evaluation. And he couldn't explain as to why this was happening. I was put in seclusion for 30 days, and then
because they thought it was something you caught. In other words, is what you're saying.
Well, they were trying to rule out everything. They were
right, but still, I know, trying to be. Yeah, but that shows how much they didn't know, I guess.
Exactly. Well, see, they'll never admit that, though. They will not admit that. And they rather put a label on what you have.
No, they're not.
Instead of saying, well, we really don't know how you succumb to this condition.
Right.
So, in any case, so after the 30 days, they've given me like lots of medication. At that time, they were throwing 60 pills, 60 different types of medications I had to take every day. And what they were doing was they were evaluating me to see whether or not how I would react to certain medications, so they could rule out certain conditions. So I took these 60 pills every single day while I was in the hospital. And then just before being released, I I had to sign something that says I will continue my medication. And so, which was another 6 months, and it was a lot of I mean, we're talking about a ton of medication, pills that you have to swallow. And it's funny because always had a problem swallowing pills. But when I was
I have a
there,
son like that.
when I was there, I
have a son like that. Yeah.
Yeah. And and it was critical. I almost lost my life, and it was because of this.
And did they ever give you an answer? Ever?
No,
I thought not.
No. I mean, they just simply said what the condition was in terms of what the sac,
right,
around the heart, that type of thing. But they didn't say what caused it. How did that happen? Because having a 2-liter sack of blood wrapped around your heart right there at that particular time, just 24 hours before being struck by an invisible entity. I mean, it's like.
I'm going to ask because I have to ask. Did you tell any of your doctors what you were doing when this happened? Did any of them look at you or?
Okay, I have a primary care physician who I've known for many years. And he's like in his 70s. I mean, he's been studying medicine for 50 years. He is totally, he's an atheist, doesn't believe in the supernatural, doesn't believe in afterlife, doesn't believe any of that stuff. So I chose not to share any of that with him.
Okay, it's like that. He's not gonna get it.
I went to another physician, and he's an Asian man, well learned, and I told him, I confided in him because I didn't know him very well and he didn't know me. So I just told him what happened. And he said, wow, that's exactly what explained your condition. And in fact, he even said, if you need me to confirm what you just said, I will. And that was interesting. As I said, that was back in 2013. Then I wrote an article about it. And I think it's in my book too. So yeah, it's
So did this ever repeat itself? This thing with the.
Anytime something happens to you and it's of a true spiritual nature, whether it's dark or light, you're always going to have something that will be a residual of that, and you will live with that.
Okay.
I call it a spiritual tattoo. It's a mark. Physical mark on your body as a result. And then there's a chain reaction. Anything that's foreign that touches your body or goes into your body, there's a chain reaction in your cells, in your whole metabolism is altered because of that particular incident. Now, we were talking about information, and we get information all the time. It's interesting. When they do an autopsy, and they remove the brain, you will see the brain and you will see all these lines and creases along the brain. Every time you receive information, it leaves a physical mark on the cortex of your brain. So everything that I'm saying to you, it's leaving marks on your brain. Everything that you see, your daily routine, information is constantly being filtered and goes directly to your brain. So these marks are left. Now just think of all the residual effects that may have occurred from your early childhood, your early remembering things in the very early time.
Yes.
I mean, all the stuff is with you. Now, consciously, you may not remember these details, but if you know anything about clinical hypnotherapy or hypnosis, it's been said that people that are actually under a deep form, which hypnosis is a deep form of relaxation, when that person gets to that point, their subconscious mind is open, and as a result, things start surfacing when questioned. If you ask the right questions, you get very interesting answers, and it all comes from your subconscious mind. So you may not even be aware of it. The thing is, with the spiritual, when you come to supernatural things, when it touches you, affects you, it not only is being registered by ways of your mind, but your body is also reacting to it, because the whole entire environment within yourself has been altered because something unusual has taken place. And as a result, that happens, you're not the same person. What happened to me as a result of the attack that I experienced back in 2013 is that I have a constant ringing in my ears. I have a
You
short.
got tinnitus from it?
Yes. I had an operation about 3 months ago because I
Uh-huh.
sciatica really bad, my lower back
Yes.
on the left side.
Okay.
I
Okay.
went to my surgeon and he did a CAT scan and he read it, 2 weeks later, and he read it and he said, you know what? I could see your sciatica is coming from your right side. He says, I don't
Right.
see anything in your left. And yet the pain was coming from my left side and not my right. I didn't have a
Okay.
problem. It all came from the side where I was struck by that invisible entity.
Yeah,
It was a residual.
yes. Uh-huh.
So I had the operation. Interesting enough, for lower back pain, it was so terrible I could barely walk. They removed 3 bones from my back of my neck in order
Okay.
to release the pressure that was being weighed down. My whole spinal column was being weighed down all the way down. It was like they call it some kind of compression, and as a result, they had to relieve that pressure. So they had to remove those
Right.
3 bones, and so as a result, thank God I don't no longer have the problem anymore. I could walk now. I don't
So
have
it worked. The
work,
removing of the
but
3 vertebrae.
now I have the pain in my neck. So it kind of like moved from there to there. Anyway, but all of this, I mean, my whole physical being was altered as soon as I willingly stepped into the realm of darkness to try to remedy whatever problem it was.
What, if I may ask, what was the outcome of that exorcism?
I was successful, but I had to pay the price.
Oh, no. I was going
I
to
said
say,
earlier,
I was hoping that
there's
you were
always-
going to tell me.
There's always a price that has to be paid, whatever you do. And people that are that sit in my position, they have to be willing to offer that price,
Right,
to help that person. And as a result, when you do that, you get nothing. There's nothing for free. You always have to pay a price. And for the person who is in the role as a divine called exorcist, he has to be willing to make and do and give the price that has to be done in order to be successful. So it's a sacrifice, but it's a sacrifice. We all make sacrifices, but when we choose to do this, it's because of a calling, and
right.
so it gets.
And let me ask you something, and obviously because of your experience, is there a hierarchy of demonic or non-human,
Sure.
whatever you want to call them,
Yeah.
where you get dumb and stupid to highly intelligent and malevolent,
Yeah,
and in between?
exactly. It's like an army. Okay, you have the generals
Mm-hmm.
or the commanders, and then you have
Okay.
The majors and the colonels, and you have the captains and you have lieutenants, and then you have the lower portion, which is the unlisted men, the privates. There's a lot of privates. There's a lot of commanders too.
Okay.
We're in this constant battle where every one of these various entities are involved. We have, and in our belief system, we have the Archangel Michael, who is there in the battle and fighting for our. In fact, that's the little statue I have behind me.
Right. Yes, I see that back there.
Okay.
Yes. St. Michael the Archangel. Yes.
Right. So I mean, we have him fighting on our side. Satan has all of his armies, his warriors, and they're all fallen angels. These are the angels that were with him when he was Lucifer in heaven, and God thrust him out of heaven because he wanted to be like God, and God just would not have that, and took 1/3 of the angels that were in heaven, Lucifer took them with him. So all of 1/3 of angels from heaven went down with Lucifer. As we know, Lucifer now is Satan, and all the fallen angels are demons. And depending as to what type of attack an individual goes through, we have done rituals on an individual and do the same exorcism over and over and over again for a period of 4, 5, 6 months, sometimes up to a year, because it's not just one demonic entity in that individual, but there's a multiple demonic entities. They're being possessed by many demons. Where that happens in our ritual, we ask what the name of that individual demon is. The
Okay.
demon has to identify himself eventually. So what we do is a series of prayers, which is the ritual, a series of prayers over and over again, and ask them, when are you leaving? What is your name? Why are you there? And we keep dwelling and dwelling. And meantime, it's like a boxing match, we'll throw some blows. Then, of course, our enemy will throw some blows. Sometimes it can be fatal. We've had people that died. We've had victims that have died over the years.
I bet.
Okay, and I'm talking about, we're all related to the ritual that we conducted.
Okay.
And so, it's a very serious ordeal when you take up this role and decide to do this. And of course, you have to be definitely have to be called to do this.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. Which is why I originally asked you that. I said, this is not for everybody.
No.
It's not for everybody. And some people recognize it as such. And I guess, haven't you ever had anybody that maybe even in one of the teams that thought this was the thing for them until they got there?
Oh, yeah.
And then they saw the genuine thing. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, no. In other words, they had what do they call it? A coming to Jesus moment? Like, what? This is what? You mean this is, it's like, yeah.
I'll tell you, for every person
that
applies to be part of our assessment team, all of them are volunteers, by the way. Nobody gets paid. This is all volunteers, okay?
Right.
Our visitors are volunteers. I mean, the clergy volunteers. These are all volunteers. Okay. When they come to us and they say, "I'm interested in becoming part of your assessment team," then we'll say, "Okay," and then we'll accept them, especially if we could use their talents and so on. And in terms of their abilities, and as a result, become part of the team. For every 10 people that we recruit, we lose about probably close to 7 because they
really
because they see that.
I'm laughing because I knew that you lost people, but it was 70%. It's like The
reason being is that they see that what we're doing is real.
Exactly.
This is Hollywood. This is not TV. This is not the Ghost Adventures or anything. This is the real thing. Okay. And so when you see someone who out of nowhere begins bleeding from the ears, from the nose, from the mouth, and when they themselves experience that for the first time, they smell the sulfur, they hear the banging on the walls, and they know that there's nobody's banging on the wall, but they hear these sounds coming up, and they hear all these things, and they start seeing things move and fly off the shelves and whatever it is. And when they start seeing this firsthand, I mean, it's like when I saw those people in Pasadena, California, when they were doing the magical tricks, and they were turning their head and their face would turn into another mask, and then turn again, their face would turn into another mask. It was that kind of like, whoa, moment of reality. Like, this stuff is real. This is not an illusion. This is not a magic trick. This is real, the real thing. This is what happens when an investigator comes into our program and our teams, and they actually see this for the first time, and they go, "Whoa, this is actually real." I mean, this is like, it's not like you're running into a room and saying, "Oh, I heard a sound." It's when you start seeing fluids come down the wall, and then we've tested the fluids and found out that to be human plasma with the fluids coming down, and there was no point of reference. It would come down,
right?
Okay,
exactly.
Or it starts raining maggots from the ceiling. No reason for that at all. It was a distraction because we're reading the ritual. I have somebody who also reads. Behind me, he's assisting me. Okay, and so I'm reading the rituals, and these maggots start falling down, and I see them coming. At first, I feel it on my hair, and then I look down, and they're falling on my book. And then the guy who's behind me, the priest or the lead exorcist, or rather the lead investigator, he would be reading the responses, to the ritual. Okay. And then so when he's reading, he sees all these things falling on him, and he freaks out, runs out of the room, and then I'm left there alone again. So it's like, okay, it's one of those realisms, it's really happening. Where are they coming from? Okay. They're falling from the sky. and we're inside a house. They're not coming from the ceiling. They're just materializing in midair.
Materializing out of nowhere.
Down.
Right. And this
So
is this is not a magic trick as in, oh, somebody's going to come from behind and go, yeah, look, I had a bucket of maggots and, no. And I'm telling you, yeah, that's why I had to laugh because it was like 7 out of 10. Yeah. God, that's more than I thought, but it's not unexpected. You mentioned something to me, and let's go down this. And you said something about aliens.
Oh, yeah.
That I forgot.
Once in a while, I'm invited on the show at least 3 times a year, and they're all military people. Okay. And as a result, they all have witnessed or something that would be identified as a UFO, and things in this nature. And I've had in one of my interviews with them, I made a list. Prior to the interview, I made a list of all the symptoms of demonic possession, what you see, what the person goes through, and so on. And then I made a list based on the information I received from the internet. These are testimonies of people that have said that they've been abducted by aliens. They've been, they interacted, things in this nature. Okay, I went down all the symptoms there, and then I put them together, both lists. You would be amazed. About 95% of the symptoms of demonic possession match the symptoms of people that have been abducted by ETs and so on. They are they're like completely. So I'm at the mindset, and I know a lot of clergy would agree with me, that it's more of a deception. Okay, it could be something that's being used by the darkness to actually materialize certain things. Again, based on your belief system. But I have another hypothesis, and this hypothesis is based on my inner feelings. There are 2 things that could be going on. Number one, it could be a time traveler. It could be perhaps somebody from our future coming back to their past, which is our present, to study, or maybe come in and they're trying to prevent something from happening. So the gratifications will not travel to their present. So they have to go back in time to try to change it. It's far-fetched. There's no such thing as time travel, but again, who knows? But then
there will be.
Yeah, but another hypothesis is, what if these are people? I mean, scientists have already confirmed that there's at least 10 dimensions. Oh, so what if these people are being transported from one dimension to another?
Sure, interdimensional
and at will. And so the hypothesis, of course, of interdimensional travel is very well known. Okay, people have been talking about it and theorizing it for many years. So as a result, I'm under the opinion they could be one of 2. Do I believe the possibility of life from another planet? Aliens and so on, ETs and stuff. Anything is possible, but I'm more likely in the belief system that if it's not demonic, it's us traveling from one point to another, or in time, or a interdimensional thing. Since our science has already proved that there's at least 10 dimensions that coexist. Which means that there's another version of you that actually exists, but slight, alterations.
Right.
But you're still existing.
In other words, because we always, at one point, like in the 50s with the flying saucers, we always think of travel in space as in like light years, like length, a mileage or light years, which is how you measure it. But what if it's interdimensional travel, which is why they are able to do that or disappear? And I used to belong to a group when I was living in Miami that they would get together, ufologists, and after the meeting, the people would come like from MUFON, do presentations, and people get together afterwards. I spoke to quite a few people that had a sighting. I'm not even talking abduction, a UFO sighting, and then they would start having paranormal things start going on in their house, and they couldn't. We were talking about it. They're telling me about it. Because they could not understand what one thing had to do with the other.
Yeah.
They had a sighting, and then stuff started happening at their house. And it was like, I thought, because a lot of people see this as 2 different things: UFO, paranormal, as in either poltergeist activity, knockings, shadows, or nightmares, all of these things. And it was like, And more than one person told me that, by the way. People that didn't know each other told me that,
Yeah.
that had happened to them.
So there's another reason for shadow people. You've heard of those.
Yes.
They could actually be people that are trying to go from one dimension to another, and you're actually witnessing them by using your peripheral vision. Your peripheral vision is very interesting because you could see things that normally you would not be focusing in on. Okay, you're mainly focusing here. Your peripheral vision is like almost your second sight. So things that are actually happening, okay, from your peripheral vision could be something that can actually be seen, and the other times can just disappear right before your very eyes. So it's kind of an interesting concept.
Right. And I've heard of people having sightings of either shadow people or apparitions or something, but they can only see them, like you said, on the peripheral vision. If they turn to look at it, they can't see it. Same thing, how sometimes they'll capture something via a camera or a video recorder, but if they try to look at it with their naked eye, they can't see it. Okay. But I've heard so much of that peripheral vision, which is, and at the beginning, when they have these sightings, they're thinking it's their imagination. Like, oh, you know how you'll like think, oh, I saw something move and it was just, maybe I didn't understand. But after a while, they realize I keep seeing this, whatever it is, this shadow or this movement, or maybe even the figure, depending on how good your peripheral vision is. And they realize, no, there's something there.
Yeah.
And as long as almost I'm looking at it from the side, I can see it. If I turn to look at it, nothing. And that's a weird thing. It's but yeah, there's a lot of overlap, even though, like I said, and as far as people think of UFOs, extraterrestrials, wherever the origin is, versus the paranormal, or in this case, spiritual attachments, demonic infestations, two totally different camps.
Yeah.
I think sometimes in some cases they overlap, and there's a lot of people that are probably screaming, going, "No!" But I think there is because, I mean, let me be a human about this. Some of the things, and I understand that some abduction stories, maybe people they weren't abducted, but it could be a host of things. But if you listen to a lot of the things that people describe that's done to them when they're abducted, are very demonic.
Yeah.
Okay. There's no empathy. Human suffering, whether physical and or mental, on the contrary, there is no. And I'm like, man, if you're supposed to be an advanced civilization, species, whatever you want to call it, you don't have at least that, you might be advanced maybe technologically, but I don't know, there's something there, that lack of sympathy and things that some of the people have described as horrific, that it's like, man, that's very dark, very dark.
One thing I do know for sure is that we live in a world full of mysteries and lots of questions. And sometimes we will not get the answers to those questions until we reach the end of our journey. And then when we reach the end of our journey, then I believe that we're going to get all the answers we've ever thought of.
And then it'll be all of that.
All questions. Yep.
Oh, I was right. Or boy, was I wrong about that.
Exactly.
Wow. Yeah, it's and everybody, I think that, despite all the technology that we have, the phones, the computers, all of this, I think that always the human soul yearns for a little bit of mystery, of the unexplained also, because I think that's the way of the world. Not everything can be predicted or how can I say controlled, because
I always say
the human condition.
Your line of control is only 3 feet. That's just the only thing you can control, is whatever happens 3 feet from you, because anything beyond that is totally out of your control. Are you ready for another story? Because I have regarding a computer.
Yes.
Okay. I remember I have people around the world, okay, who were submitting their assessment reports, and I would watch their presentation, their first contact interview, by way of video. So I'm watching, they would send me the video and everything else. So I'm I got some a report, and it was a month ago. It was 1 month before I received the report, the assessment report, and the video. Okay, it was 1 month before. So in other words, the first contact interview was done a month before I received the report. I'm looking at the report, and
Okay.
I could not believe what took place. I'm watching the interview as the person is interviewing the victim, asking those 60 questions that that I've designed, and they're following my my format. What happens at that point is really interesting. But before I say that, let me just make a little clarity here. Demons, demonic entities, spiritual entities, they are not subject to our time and space. Okay. What might be 1,000 years for us, for the spiritual demonic entity could be a second, a half a second, because there's no
Mhm.
time, there's no space. They're outside our realm, uh, as God is. God has no time or space. Okay, so as a result, that's what's actually taking place here when it comes to demons. There is no time. You cannot pinpoint them in terms of what time that you see them, or their actual existence, or their frame of time, because they have no time, they have no space, they're not subject to any of those things. Okay, getting back to looking at my screen. Keep that in mind, okay? So I'm
Okay.
looking at my screen, and I'm watching the interview, and the interviewer is asking the questions, and then something happens. I have a big screen. I have like a 32-inch screen, computer screen, so I could see everything. And all of a sudden, I saw this black fuzz, a little black fuzz that started traveling from one end of my screen to the other very slowly at first. So I'm thinking, well, it's obviously a video, technical
Right. A
thing.
video.
What,
Yeah. Mhm.
what else could it be? Because it was traveling very slow, and then all of a sudden the fuzz stopped at the other end, at the left side of the screen, and then started traveling to the right side of the screen very slowly. So I looked at it again. Again, I didn't think anything of it. It's like a video
Right.
glitch or something. And then,
Uh-huh.
interesting enough, the thing got my attention when it went even slower and started to expand in size. So it got to be like from a penny to maybe a half a dollar size, and it went through my screen, and it stopped right in the center of my screen.
And you're like, man, that's
And
some glitch.
I'm going, wait a minute, what the heck is that? So I've obviously, I did what anybody would do. Well, at least I would do anyway.
Yeah.
I got closer to the screen. I had to trying to make out what the heck is that thing. And then as I did, something happened that I will never ever forget. That little fuzzy thing literally threw its energy off the screen, hit me in the chest, and drove my chair way back, because I have a chair with wheels, drove me way
Uh-huh.
back. I said, okay, now what just happened? Okay. And then I had to play it back in my mind, as of course I'm away from my screen and thinking about
It's like, all right.
what the heck was that? And the
Uh-huh.
fuzz disappeared, by the way, at that point. As soon as I was hit by that energy force and pushed back, what the heck
Right.
is that? So I lifted my shirt up because there was a burning sensation. And sure enough, I have a picture of it too, by the way. It was
Okay.
a handprint, and it was pushed me back. And as a result, I put two and two together and figured out that what I was actually watching, even though it was a month ago in my time, okay,
Right.
demonic has not confined to any time or space. So that I
Mm-hmm.
was watching it in real time. The demonic was in real time, and it was traveling through the screen, and jumped off the screen and physically hit me.
Right.
That
No. It wanted
that
you
was
out of the picture.
eye opening there, because the time and space thing definitely applies. Even though everything was supplied to me a month before, or rather a month after the
Let me
assessment.
ask you, isn't this a good tip off that, yeah, that there is something demonic going on there? I mean, because basically they're trying to get you out of the picture, either physically or scare you. I mean, it's like,
Yeah, well, and it will always do that. I mean, even to this day, I have things moving around me, and
yeah.
and if I was but I just accept it for what it is, because we're living in a spiritual world.
Sure.
wouldn't believe the amount of spiritual entities are around you right now. They're standing all around you. There's so much. If they had physical bodies, they would be pressing you, okay, and you would feel the pressure. We live in a spiritual world, and as a result, we're having this experience, this physical experience in the spiritual world. And so as a result, we have to look at it such as so. And that's exactly where we're at right now.
Okay, but what happened with that case? What did you do? Did you contact the person who sent it to you and go, okay,
I went to the
send it to Calvary.
I went to the same hospital I went to when I had that 2013 episode.
Yes.
Okay. Well, this was just like 2 years later. I went back to the hospital. Of course, they know me well because I'm the mysterious case. Okay, that was in critical 30 days. They immediately did a scan. They did a CAT scan, an X-ray, the whole 9 yards. Okay,
right.
And so I'm waiting for the results. I was waiting for like 3 hours in the hallway, and I'm wearing a gown, and the gown is partly open, and you could see the mark on my chest. And I overheard the nurses and maybe an orderly passed by, and they were talking among themselves, and they said, "Did you see that guy? It looks like he was in a fight with Mike Tyson."
Yeah, somebody's beat him up.
I always remember that, what he was saying. And actually, anyway, the test came back, and once again, they don't understand how that happened.
And it's like,
I wasn't about to tell them the story I just said.
No,
there are places that they send people like that.
Come this way. We have now a mental questionnaire that we want to give you.
Exactly.
Yeah, that would be like but that case, did you give feedback as in yes, go forward with it, or what happened?
And they had already completed the investigation, and they have been waiting for a month because they're waiting for the doctor's reports, because we have physical, psychological, that has to come in.
Right.
So when they received that, that's when they said, that's why it took a month for me to get it. And so I told them my impression and what happened. So I said, you definitely have something that was extraordinary, and I have to confirm that it is definitely something that's unexplainable, or is it?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, you know what? It's one of those things. Do you ever get contacted from other countries for different, if not belief systems, cultures?
All the time. Luckily, I have this wonderful feature in my computer where I could translate. Because a lot of people contact me from different cultures and so on, and so I get contact, globally, actually, and people contact me all the time. I'm not as much as you would think now. Maybe I get contact maybe once or twice a week from people from another country that are asking. Fortunately, I have bishops. I have jurisdictional bishops in 24 countries. And so they're at point. So when I'm contacted, I try to find the closest member I have that's a clergy and that has a team that can investigate. And then I will refer them to and give them the contact information, and then they take it from there. In this case, they just wanted a confirmation, and I gave them a confirmation that it was genuine.
Yeah, I bet. What a confirmation. It's like, hold on. Pull open your shirt. There's your confirmation right there. It's like, there it is. Go forward. No, I'm telling you. Thank you so much. You got to come back, because we got to talk some more, because I imagine after 40 years, you must have so many cases.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it was you or one of the team members coming and.
Well, my book's on Amazon.
That's right. Yes.
It's a short read. But it has a lot of interesting information that you will get nowhere else. Because, I've kind of like blew the whistle on a lot of things that may be considered taboo. And the cases might be interesting. And it also tells a little bit about myself. And so dealing
I'm going to put a link to your website on the credits of the show, but for the podcast listeners, what is your website address that they could go to?
www.orderofexorcist.com.
Okay. Orderofexorcist.com. Okay.
I could send you a link too, by the way. So.
Yes. No. But I put it, but I have a lot of podcast listeners that, nowadays people, they're listening to their podcasts, driving, doing everything except. So that's
I'm
why I
also on
always ask.
Facebook. Like I say, I have 10 forums on Facebook.
Okay, on Facebook, are you under your personal name or the Order of Exorcists?
Ronald Feyl Enright. And then
Okay.
when you go to that thing, you'll see a lot of interviews I've done. I've done a lot of publications, and I've been in a lot
Okay.
of stuff.
Okay.
So, to the glory of God, of course.
Yes.
Because I always talk about this, and then I say to myself, wow, do I sound like I'm boasting? I hope not. Because
No.
I'm trying not to be
No.
boastful
No.
about this
I
because it's
think that
not me.
that you know what? I think don't get me wrong. I understand that the advancements in understanding mental health or mental illness or diseases of the brain or chemical imbalances, that's great because it's helped a lot of people that can take medication, in other words.
Yeah.
But I think that how in the past people that were mentally ill were thought to be possessed. Now we've swung too much in the other direction where we think everything is a mental illness.
I have another story for you, but maybe we'll save it for
Yes,
another time.
no, go
Oh, you
ahead.
have time?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
We were invited by a family member to visit one of their siblings in a mental institution.
Okay.
And he was admitted because he had symptoms of schizophrenia.
Okay.
I would hear voices, and he would communicate with them, and then do physical things, and as a result, so he was committed. So we were invited to visit there. I went there with 4 priests, and I think and one of them was a physician that is part of our order. Went in there, and in fact, that's how we were able to get in the ward. By the way,
Right,
you have to pull strings sometimes. Sometimes you do have to.
Sure.
But we were able, and as we walked down, there was looked like a series of beds that were like in one large, long room or ward, and it was like and every person, there was like maybe every I don't know, 5 feet there was a bed. So these beds were like right next to each other, all laid out on both sides of the ward. And as we're walking through the ward, people took notice of us, stood up, literally kind of spooky, stood up, stared directly at us, and it's like they all, like in uniform, turned their head at the same time as we walked by. It was like kind of scary. And as they did, and prior to that, prior to us walking into the ward, there was a lot of screaming and hollering. And as soon as we walked in, it was total silence. And as we walked by them, you could see these hands. They all moved in like unison. It's like really a little spooky. And so this is my conclusion. Okay, I firmly believe that 90% of the people in these mental wards may have a diagnosed psychosis. However, I believe that something has brought them to that point, and it could be very well demonically influenced.
Yes.
So I'm going to say, because just like all the serial killers that are famous and we know of and so on, all of them have a direct link to the demonic. And as a result, that darkness can be found in these mental wards, because I believe that all of them have been influenced. At least 90% of them have been.
Well, and this is the thing. Let's use the schizophrenic. These people, whether they hallucinate, or some of them do abominable things, kill their parents, behead people, do horrible things. And you think, okay, why does the mental illness drive you to do such horrific things? Do you see what I'm saying? Yeah. Let's say your mental illness, whatever it is, causes you to think you're listening to, you see people that aren't there, you're hallucinating, or you have a conversation. Okay, why can't it be harmless? How's that? Yeah. But so many really horrible things are done with people with these types of serious mental illness.
Briefly, let me just say this, okay? It was a few years back, okay? I was called after we did the assessment. I was called to actually do the ritual, and this person had its eyes closed all the time. I mean, you did not understand, but the eyes were closed. The victim had his eyes closed, and I'm going through the printing ritual, and all of a sudden, the person opens its mouth, and an eyeball fell out of his mouth and bounced on the chest. What happened was earlier, this person who was possessed pulled out the eye of the person that it was, being possessed, pulled the eye out and put it in its mouth. So right when we were ready to read the main part of the ritual, this person popped the eyeball right out of their mouth.
Wait. He took whose eyeball did he take?
His victim, his own eyeball. He pulled out his own eyeball. That is, the demon did anyway.
Of course, right.
An influence pulled out the eyeball and placed it in his mouth. So when we were there to arrive and start our prayers, it would distract us. And believe me,
I sure did.
Because at that point, the eyes did open, and there was an empty socket in one of the in one of the.
That is in God.
So yeah, so we were talking about, where you're driven to do things that you would not normally do.
Right.
Well, this was a perfect example.
Right. That they do things that, it's horrific. It's deviant. It's like,
You want to hear something really interesting too that I remember is that there was not one sign of blood or anything. It was an empty socket, and
you would think that something like that would bleed a lot.
Blood gushing out.
Right. That he would have had like either blood coming out of his on the edges of his eyes.
It was an empty eye socket.
That is so horrific. That's what I'm saying. It's so dark. It's like that to me. It's like, man, okay, if you sit and you have an imaginary conversation with somebody in the corner, it's all right, whatever. He's crazy, but there's no harm. How is that? If that is whatever the nature of your mental illness, but some of them do. A lot of them sometimes do really horrible things.
Yes.
And of course, they have no fear of consequences. Like, let's say a saner person, law enforcement, as in going to jail. They
or what's being manifested from the victim is the actual personality of the demon.
Yes.
They're in the back seat. And they may even be consciously aware of everything going on, but they have no control over what's being done to their body and how their body is performing these various acts, because they're being held hostage and they're in the back seat. Okay, and so they're watching everything, but their hands and expression and everything is basically tied. They cannot do anything to prevent anything from happening. So as a result, they're the hostage in the back seat. The demonic entity has a physical manifestation that's taking place where it actually could be seen, not only in body, but also in mind and sometimes verbally. Sometimes the victim can speak one or two languages at the same time.
Okay.
Now, they say that, and it's true that it's been tested, at least physically, that it is possible to do that, to actually speak in two different languages, or at least two different sounds could come out at the same time. What's unique about the two different languages are they're two different languages that they have no knowledge of.
Right, exactly.
So it could be French and it could be German at one time. So the words are being formulated. Okay, physically, it's not possible to do that because of your voice box and the whole physical mechanism. It's just not possible to do that. However, when a person has a form of demonic possession condition, if you want to call it, when that's on, anything is up for grabs. I mean, you will see that happen. You will see various parts of your body missing. Okay, I just mentioned the eyeball because I thought that was interesting. But you can see other things that will change. There's, as I said, the skin color, the hair could change, the eyes could change to a solid black or a solid white. It just, it depends on the situation and who's being, possessed and their inner experiences. A lot of things like that can take place. So it's interesting when you're diagnosing something like that.
Yes.
You have to make sure that you rule out everything that could possibly mimic what you're actually witnessing. If you can do that,
because I've heard of some of these serial killers, not all of them, and I know some of them. They'll say after they finish committing some crime, murder, of course, that they don't remember.
Yeah.
They, they're interviewed, and some people can say, "Wow, that's a great defense." You're going for the insanity plea. But there's some of them that's not all, but some of them will say, "I don't remember committing these acts." Yeah. This is the last point I remember, and then that whole, whether it was hours or days or whatever, they're totally blanked out. And it could be sometimes it's the mind will do that. But then you think also what you just described, where basically the one that was in control was a demonic entity and pushed them to the back.
Yeah.
And maybe to maintain some type of sanity, they blank out that.
It's a defense mechanism. Okay. When we,
Yeah.
and we all have this, if there's something that's traumatically happening to us,
Yes.
We will forget. The brain will actually shut off that particular point of awareness and store it somewhere in your subconscious. So it's in psychology they call it repression. So whatever is happening is being repressed into a storage compartment in the brain where you have no access to unless you're under hypnosis, and then sometimes
people, when they have that delayed memories coming back. In other words, maybe when it happened at that moment, your brain said, if you remember this, you'll lose your mind. And sometimes 2 or 3 years down the line, if maybe you're in a little bit, then you'll start maybe having flashbacks or dreams, because the brain is assessing, you can now face this and you will not lose your sanity. Yeah. But some people never get there. Some people that memories will remain locked away for their entire lives, because facing it or remembering it, I guess, they couldn't handle it. They could not handle it. And it's
I think if you read about the near-death experiences, and people just before they cross over, they have this life review that occurs, and I think that even the negative things appear at that moment in time. Memories from the time you were born to the time you're close to death, all that is merged into one. So I think you're actually reviewing things that could be very traumatic. But then if you survive and you come back, like as the near-death experiences happen to people, if you could survive that, you probably will forget that portion of what actually took place in regards to the memory or life review. And some people are perceptive enough that they might remember some things. But I've always been fascinated with people that have came close to their journey and yet been pulled back for some reason.
Right. And sometimes from what I've heard of those near-death experiences, sometimes they're not giving a choice. They said, you got to go back. Then others are given a choice. And sometimes it's that they have children or loved ones that they don't want to leave behind. In other words, it's like, I want to, but I'd rather go back because maybe I have children that I need to bring up, or somebody else that they feel that needs them, and they go back. But one of the common denominators is that they lose their fear of death.
Yeah,
after they have that near-death experience.
And also, they develop some kind of intuitiveness, where they're able to actually feel more and empathize more than before. And so some of them are very gifted like that. It's really interesting, actually.
Yes, there's a whole. I was speaking to a gentleman. His name is Piero Calvetti, and he did a near-death experience. He worked with Dr. Moody, and he was explaining to it, which I wasn't aware, because I always thought that when your brain is considered dead, that's it. He was saying, as far as how they can bring people back now, it's incredible. Even after sometimes was thought as no brain activity, they can still bring people back. And that's, I think, why you have more of these reports of people recalling near-death experience. Whereas before, that's it. You were dead. Nobody's going to bring you back. Technology now and medical knowledge lets you come back physically if you can.
I think the ultimate decision basically is can be referred to as this term that we use called choice. I think that even close to death, if you have a mindset to go and completely go to the other side, you will. I think that God gives you that choice sometimes to make that decision as to whether you want to stay or you want to go. I think that there are a lot of physicians that are fine surgeons. And with our modern technology, you can do amazing. You probably keep a person. I heard that there was a doctor in Germany that was successful in terms of transplanting a head
I don't even
For
want to think
one
about that. I
person
don't even
to,
want to
and
think
I
about
don't
that.
even know if that's real, but I remember reading something about that. So,
I'm
I mean,
thinking, yeah,
that's just
you know what? It's like you look at it, you know, once upon a time that was like a bad horror movie. You know, that was
yeah,
like that kind of theme. It would be like, okay, this is a not a B or a C, it's a D movie, horror movie.
yeah,
But yeah, there's a lot of let me tell you, nowadays especially, I think that there's a lot of bioethics as far as experimentation with the genome, things that cloning, things that I'm like, I don't think that's a good idea.
yeah.
I just there's always that. What is it? Just because you can doesn't mean you should
Sure,
when it
right.
comes to the sciences.
There's
And I know that there's some out there that scientists that it's like, yeah, I want to do it.
yeah.
And I was
Oh
telling
yeah,
somebody
yeah.
one time I was speaking to a priest that and he was we got into a conversation because he was teaching at a university that used to be next to the high school I used to attend, and I asked him what he was teaching, and he was saying, I'm teaching about bioethics, and I said, really, why? And he goes, well, and it's a Catholic high school. I'm sorry, a Catholic university.
Mhm.
And he was saying that in certain laboratories in other countries, they were doing experimentation between human and animal, stuff that ethically was
Mhm.
not right. And I was like, are you kidding me? Because to me, I was like, what? And he goes, yeah. He says that's what we teach as far as the ethics of what you should do or not do, even if you have the ability to do it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I hate to say it, it's it makes you wonder um, what are they doing sometimes as far as ability of things that, yeah, you could do it, but to me, it's like you're
I
going down the dark path.
I think one of the main things that gets in the way of good judgment is this thing we know as ego. You know,
Oh boy,
a lot
yeah,
to do with making bad decisions.
yes,
But
no,
I
I
do know that
yeah,
there's a research facility in Texas, I believe, and they have for decades now. They have been cloning various parts of a pig
yes,
and experimenting in terms of transplanting. I think the heart may be one of the organs that they're transplanting, and saying that it's possible, to survive at least a short period of time with a
mhm,
transplant like that, and that is after they've cloned, the heart of a pig or something like that, which I thought
right,
was really interesting too. Should they play God? I don't know. Is it playing God? If God gives us the information, gives us the knowledge to do certain things, I think it's okay, because if God wants to, um, well, He's given us free choice, okay, to do anything we want to do it
right.
up to a certain degree, but He also has the ability to not allow us to do certain things, and um, it really depends on your belief system, I suppose.
But you know what? And this, I think, is, and I agree with you. This thing about free choice to do or not to do something.
Right.
The problem, I think, is that the choices that some people make ends
Hmm.
up affecting a lot of people. And I tell you, back in the 1990s, there used to be a magazine. I think it's not in publication anymore. It was called Omni. And they
Oh
would
yeah.
publish all these
Yeah.
scientific, just really interesting. It was more of a and science based
Hmm.
magazine.
Hmm.
And I remember back in this was already the genome. We had already DNA, all that stuff,
Right.
and they were talking about cloning a human body. Okay, cutting out the portion of the brain, basically leaving only the portion of the brain that maintains life, like breathing,
Hmm.
to keep the body alive. In other words,
It's life support. Yeah.
and basically use the body as a transplant to harvest organs. And I was like, that's horrible.
Yeah.
And then the part of the gist of the article was, even if you've reproduced this body, this human, not within, like, basically a test tube,
Hmm.
and you cut out the part that gives a person, does that human still have a soul?
Right.
And it was like, God, to me it was like horrible. And I tried to look at it from the medical point of view of people that need organ transplants. And I was like, that's if you tell me, hey, I'm going to take let's say you need some type of transplant of some organ, and they tell you, we're going to take your DNA, your own DNA, and we're going to be able to reproduce this organ that you need.
Yeah.
And your body's not going to reject it because it's you. I don't have a problem with that. When you're talking cloning a human being, that was like, man, this is like Frankenstein stuff.
I'm going to tell you a brief story, okay, which is part of my. I've been in California since the early '70s, and in public ministry in California and globally through the training of various clergy, which are in different countries and so on. I've seen a lot of stuff. What I also remember were I used to do a lot of work in the Skid Row area of downtown Los Angeles, where you have these Skid Row hotels where people are, they check in and sometimes they never check out. Okay, and as a result, there's all kinds of demonic infestation and hauntings and things of this nature that are occurring in these places. But there's one interesting thing that I will never forget, and that is the number of homeless people that are missing and totally without a trace. Okay, I mean, totally, you cannot find them anywhere. And for a long time, it was believed that there are people that will harvest organs.
Yes.
And you go to the Skid Row areas where people are homeless and they're not in touch with their relatives and so on. Then nobody will know that they're missing.
Yeah.
Because they're missing to begin with.
Yeah, their family of origin has already given up on them because they just can't control them. And like you said, they've lost track of them.
It's a big business collecting organs. I was told somewhere that the profit margin for collecting organs, the main organs, is about $350,000.
I believe it.
So I mean, it's a serious money, and there are shady people out there who are, as I believe, demonic influence there, will do just that, for money. The scripture says, "What shall it profit a man if he gain the whole world and lose his soul?" I think a lot of these individuals have lost their soul because they're trying to get ahead and doing it all the wrong ways, and I think that's really interesting.
Of course, and I totally believe it. That despite there's a lot of people that will donate their organs. That they've decided to, but still the demand is far more than any type of donations that people will make on a volunteer basis. It's just too much. And what was it the other that I heard? And I don't know. Sometimes you hear these stories that, like in India, very impoverished countries, people will sell one of their kidneys, for example. You got the other one for money.
Yeah.
Because, in other words, they're not being fooled. They know what they're doing. And I was like, that's horrible. Yeah. And that there is, like you described, a big market, a demand for it. How's that?
Yep.
And it's like that's.
There'll always be a demand because, there's heart failure that happens quite often. I don't know how many thousands of cases occur every year of somebody needing an organ transplant, especially a heart, and a heart is a very expensive in terms of dollars and cents to have, especially if you're going to sell it. And that's just so horrible because that.
Well, and based on what you described, as far as the when you said all these these homeless that nobody's ever around to say, hey, I don't see so and so anymore.
Right.
There's I don't know if you've ever heard of the Doe Network, which is it lists all the missing people that have been found. And some of them they have no name. They'll say we found this. Sometimes the skeletal remains, or and sometimes they kind of know who it is, and other times they have no idea. And what's surprising is that most of the time they try to match it up possibly with a missing persons report, saying, well, maybe we could find this person that was the family issued a missing persons report, and we were able to this is who we're talking about. And even now, sometimes they're able to take DNA depending when the remains were found. But it's staggering how many people are found that they have no idea who they were. None. Nobody ever contacted a local police department to say, whether it was a family or a friend, this person, I haven't seen them or heard from them ever again.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most people think, no, that's incredible. If one of my friends or family went missing, I would report it.
Sure.
There's a lot of people that fall through the cracks.
Yes, that's absolutely true. I could remember this happened a long time ago, 35 years ago or so. I'm sitting in my office in downtown Los Angeles, and one of my bishops came in, and he told me to close the door, and he was trying to keep this under your breath, and he opened a book. And I don't know if you remember a magazine. There used to be a mag. I think it's out of print now. What the heck? It wasn't Life magazine. It was another. It was like a paperback book that used to come out. It wasn't Life. It was the other, something else.
Reader's Digest. Time.
That's it. Reader's Digest. It was the Reader's Digest.
Okay.
Exactly.
Okay.
And this was back about 1984. And he showed me a book, and he opened the Reader's Digest, and in the center fold there was pictures of hundreds of children, hundreds, and the big headline is "Missing Without a Trace."
Yes.
And every year there's at least 200 to 300,000 children that are missing from the face of the earth. I mean, here in this country, just in this country alone,
yes.
That's incredible.
Yes.
And so he was telling me that he understood where these children were disappearing, and then so he went into his whole hypothesis. It was regarding the upper. I'm trying to word this just right because it's I don't want to cause any panic or anything, but
No.
but there is in our society there's the upper class that have lots of influence, lots of money, and can live any way they want and make demands at any point.
Yes.
There's a belief system out there, at least this is what he told me. There's a belief system out there that the upper crest of our society have found the fountain of youth. And the fountain of youth is digesting blood, human blood,
yes,
from children, innocent children. And
yes,
that will somehow prolong your lifespan as a result from
yes,
drinking that. And as a result, there's a demand for that. There's actually a commodity that
yes,
segment of our society that can
yes,
afford such services, as barbaric
yes,
as it sounds. But understand,
yes,
even in the early Christian years, era, okay, human sacrifices have always been made.
yes,
Okay, always. It's always been part of life. So
yes,
not far-fetched to say that even today there is such a thing where the upper crest are actually paying for blood from
yes,
these children. It's a horrible thing to think about.
yes. And some people can say
reality.
Very few of those children that disappear are parental kidnappings. Very few. Sometimes you'll have these disputes between parents.
Yeah.
Where sometimes one parent, sometimes even with good reason, I'm going to say, it's not always like we'll do a parental kidnapping, but that's minuscule. That's a drop in the bucket as far as these kids that disappear. Where, like you said, no, this was not a parent who took the kid. No, no. And it's like, where did they go?
Yeah.
Where did they go? And sometimes, sometimes, I'm sure you've heard of people where the remains are found years later. And, now with DNA, they can actually identify if they're lucky enough. But yes, I have heard of that. And I do believe that. I mean, whether it's for the longevity, which, come on, if you're doing that, we're talking here, dark practices, black magic, Luciferianism, Satanism. Take it, give it whatever title you want. If you're willing to do this to stay young, it's like, that's horrible.
Oh, yeah. You have the money and you have the dark mindset of doing that. I mean, think about it. And I know a lot of celebrities, you do too, that
Mm-hmm.
seem that they never age, and yet they're
Right. Or they're
wealthy,
very, they're,
successful, and we're not going to mention any names, but
yeah,
there are
right,
some that
right.
we know are singers, and they never age. I mean, it's like, they
But
look the same. Like,
you know
40 years
what?
past, they look the
I'm
same.
going to propose something that, because everybody's into celebrity,
Yeah.
but I tell everybody there's a big power in anonymity. I think there's very powerful people
Yeah.
that sometimes we don't even are aware. Their names are never spoken.
Yeah.
And by the way, they're more that they understand. You know how everybody's caught up with celebrity or being seen or whatever. They understand that there's more power in being anonymous.
Yeah.
Then, in other words, you're never going to see them on the cover of a magazine or in a tabloid or in a doc. Nothing. You know, somebody will say their name and you'll go, "Who?"
Yeah.
Those are the people that really understand it. Those are the people that do things that some they're never if they you know how nowadays you see the names of CEOs and CFOs, you'll never hear their name or their family name spoken ever.
Yeah.
Ever. A lot of people don't think they exist. I think they exist.
They say that
That's Marlene's.
there's 12 families, okay, that live in right now in our time. They're extremely wealthy, beyond billionaires,
Mhm.
and they
Right.
control the world politics. They
Yeah, of
control
course.
things that happen in the world
Yeah.
because and everything else that we see, where we think that we actually know what's going on, we really don't. I mean, there's so many things behind closed doors. It's part of like some of my stories. I tell you, these are
Mhm.
things that are not revealed because they're number one, they're too horrifying.
Right.
I
Yeah,
mean,
exactly.
especially if you have a mindset that you really want to really think about some of the descriptions as to what actually took place. I mean, it's too horrifying. So
Right.
it's never discussed, and if it is, like the movie The Exorcist when that came out,
Yes.
based on a true story. But you
Mhm.
know what? The reality is, and I'm just surmising here, about 20% of that is probably extremely accurate. Only 20%. The 80% was filtered in for entertainment, and
Right. Yeah.
it's called creative movie created license.
License, yeah, like dramatic, like for dramatic purposes.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So it's like just only some of that. Okay, even though it's supposedly based on true story. Yeah, I'm
Right.
sure it is, but it doesn't say. When you say based on a true story, do you mean like completely
Yeah.
or half or what percentage
Just,
actually?
just, yeah,
Oh,
just the
yeah,
that there was that was a 14-year-old boy, and then we made it a girl, but that's the only basis in reality that it had, and everything else was made up to go with it.
right, exactly.
Yeah, it's like absolutely. And as a matter of fact, the Amityville Horror, that came out. I
Yep.
was recently reading that when Jay Anson wrote the novel, which is where they made the movie, he made up a bunch of stuff
Yeah.
from how in the movie the priest goes into the house and here's a get out and the flies and all of this, that they interviewed all the people surrounding it, and he made up a lot of it.
Yeah.
And of course, people don't care because, like you said, if I remember correctly, I think the poster for the original Amityville horror was something like based on true events, something like that.
Yeah.
And people think the whole thing is true, and it's not. They just put here bits and pieces of which, as a matter of fact, Butch DeFeo, the son that was convicted of killing the family, he just died last year.
Oh.
He passed away last year at the age of 69. Yeah. And they were, because if you really think about it, everybody looks at what the Lutz's experienced, and I'm thinking, wait, if you really want to look at dark, let's go back to what happened before that murder of an entire family, whether he did it by himself or somebody, that family annihilation thing.
Mm-hmm.
Who cares about people that spent 28 days and ran out the front door? That's nothing.
Right.
It's like, oh.
Right.
But yes, I know what you mean. Back in those years, and that's what they did with The Exorcist. Which, let me tell you something. I think people were shocked out of their shoes. We were too innocent when that movie came out. People were like, I heard that parishes were being overrun with people asking to get exorcised.
Yeah.
That's
Amazing, huh?
yeah. Nowadays, people are like, huh, oh, yeah. That's unfortunate. That's where it's gone. Again, thank you so much. By the way, are you planning another book, or are you just gonna see
No,
what happens with this
we
one?
have a sequel coming. And
Okay.
so, yeah, and the sequel is going to involve well, I don't want to give too much away, but it's going to be involving the input of other people who can attest to whatever's going on in terms of
Okay.
the scenario. So it's going to be interesting.
Okay.
If people go to my website, orderofexorcist.com, there's a link to where they could click on the very first page. They could click to Amazon, which goes to the book thing, and
Okay.
Amazon allows you to read the first 13
Yeah,
pages.
they give you a preview. Yes.
So
Yes.
just read the 13 pages, and you'll see where this is going. I think it's interesting. I've got a lot of good feedback from people who've read it, so
That's
it's
great.
good.
I gotta read it. It's on Kindle, right?
I think it is too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Again, Archbishop, it has been absolutely, God, it's been fascinating to speak to you, and I will be sending you an email maybe in a couple of months so you can come back and we can talk some more, because it's absolutely fascinating.
Don't forget to send me a link to this program too, so I could.
Absolutely, yes, I will. I'll send you the video link and the one for the podcast version.
Excellent.
Okay.
Excellent. It was so nice meeting you too.
Likewise. Take care. Have a good night.
I will, and you too. Take care. God bless. Bye-bye now.
Likewise. God bless you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Wow. This has been so interesting. Yeah. See, he's talking about seeing it all. Yeah. Somebody, when something for 40 years, believe me, you've seen it all. What is that? The movie, The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly? You've seen it. You can't help but see it. To see what happens, like he said, when, is it not mental illness? Is it beyond mental illness? God, that thing about the eyeball in the guy's mouth. Oh my God. That is, talk about you must need intestinal fortitude to stand your ground on that. That's incredible. And also what he described that happened to him in 2013 with this malady that even now the doctors have never really given him a straight answer as to what caused it. In the middle of an exorcism. And, that's why, and I've mentioned it before in other shows, there's still priests that are coming out of the seminary and other people. And by this, I'm talking about the Catholic religion, even though I know there's deliverance ministers and other religions that have people who do the equivalent of an exorcism, who they want to be priests, but they don't want to do this because it is so psychologically draining. Let's forget the physical aspects of it. Psychologically, it is, I totally agree with Archbishop Feyl about you must have a calling for this. And I had to laugh. I know I laughed uproariously because when he said 7 out of 10 of his volunteers don't stick around. Think about it. You know what? Because I'm thinking to myself, if you volunteer to do this, I imagine if you're one of the groups that basically you are going in there on their behalf to test the waters and see what's what. Okay. This is not like a paranormal team that's going in there because, you think it's a ghost. I imagine maybe at some point, hopefully, if you're going in there, maybe there was even another team that went there first, backed out, and said, hey, whatever's in there is dark. They're going to need something, some intense intervention here. So whoever goes, like he said, that he sends in a team, these people that volunteer for this already know I'm going to come across something like, whoa. And you still get 7 out of 10, a 70% dropout rate. That tells you that however much they wanted to prepare in their mind, or they thought they were committed, like, yeah, this is what I want to do. Like he said, this is all of a sudden when they're there and they see manifestations, that this is not the movies, this is not FX, this is not computerized, that they try to logic it. They're seeing something, witnessing something that they're trying to logic, and they're like, man, this is not Ghost Adventures, whatever, you know what I'm saying? This is, I hear this, I've seen this person levitate, or like you said, or I'm seeing something form on a wall and drip down, and where's it coming from? That's just a wall. Or I hear banging, or I'm smelling something that I know, like what's like rotted eggs or something like that. Okay. That coming to Jesus moment. You know what? I know there's a lot of people out there saying, you know what, Marlene, all those things, it's just they're attributable to mental illness. So sometimes severe mental illness. Up to a certain point, I agree. There's some cases where it's untreated maybe untreated, undiagnosed mental illness, severe mental illness. And I've said it before, I don't think one thing excludes the other. You could have somebody with an undiagnosed or untreated diseased brain that you could say their behavior or the way they see reality is strictly a product of their illness. And up to a certain point it could be, but that they could on top of it also have some type of spiritual interference. I think so too. And yeah, there's going to be maybe the people that's just strictly, and like I was saying, you hear these horrific things that these people that have these severe mental illnesses do, schizophrenia. I mean, let's not even go with the suicide thing, but they kill their parents, siblings, people they don't know. And it's just that the killing, it's like they cut off heads, horrible, horrible things. And it's like, okay, why does the mental illness or whatever it is, an imbalance of the chemicals in the brain, so well, whatever it is, why does it drive you to do that? What there's a really old, I'm going to date myself here. There's a really old Jimmy Stewart movie. I think it was called Harvey or something like that. This really old movie. Okay. Before my time, but it was like when he was young. And the whole premise of the movie is that he's this guy who sees a giant rabbit that he calls Harvey. And he's just considered eccentric. Outside of the fact that he talks to Harvey and he sees Harvey and everywhere he goes, there's Harvey. The whole movie is built around that. It's pretty good. And Jimmy Stewart was a perfect person to play the guy. And then at the end of the movie, you see him go out a gate, and then the gate opens by itself. And what was it that I think that Harvey was supposed to be a puka or something. I don't remember. I saw this a long time ago. My point being, if people's mental illness was that they were hallucinating, that they're seeing a giant rabbit that accompanies them everywhere, and you have to set a place at the table for Harvey. Okay, harm done. Okay, so peculiar. Okay. But when the person starts doing such horrific things as killing animals, killing people, horrific that basically you are, what do you call it? Basically what you're seeing is some type of darker influence enmeshed within the whatever's going on with that person, whatever it is. Either that or it aggravates the symptoms. All right. To me, when I hear these stories, and sometimes, unfortunately, even people like, let's say, like his organization that wants to help somebody with an exorcism, sometimes I understand completely where they have to make sure that that person is diagnosed correctly, and sometimes they have to leave it at that. It's like, yeah, this person, yeah, they might have an attachment or they have some type of demonic oppression or whatever the case might be, but he's also been diagnosed with that, and we're going to have to leave him in the hands of physicians that can treat him and give him medication, and that's it. They have to step back from it. And I understand that. But God, I can't wait till he comes back. God, you know what? And some of these things I know are disquieting if you really stop and think about it. Because think about it. You're thinking, let's go with this. Let's go with the serial killers. Why not? Let's say, I mean, I know somebody could say, well, Marlene, you know what? If you leave it up to criminals, they'll blame the devil, like that thing, the devil made me do it. Everybody's going to take the fall, because, hey, it's easier than taking responsibility for it, right? Right? Well, I don't know. I still think, not all the cases, but I think in some cases, even though some people could say, well, Marlene, basically what you're doing is you're giving somebody an out of if they've done something really horrible. I don't. And by the way, that could also mean that this person at some point actually welcomed or invited that entity to be with them. In other words, it wasn't like, oh, I'm losing my memory while I do this. No, this thing was egging it on, and it was like match made in hell kind of deal. Now, I'm not going to say that all of them were they did it under the possession, and then when they came to, I remember. No, sometimes they're totally on board from the beginning with what they're doing. But anyway, let me get on real quick, since this has been such a long interview, to my crazy, let's see, paranormal news of the day. Let's see. Good. Okay. Here we go. We're here. Yes. Come on, guys. Let's face it. This is a great story. Chihuahua ghost is haunting my house. I can hear his claws in the hallway. This is from the Mirror. Okay, this came out today. Says a paranormal skeptic is convinced that Chihuahua is haunting her house after spotting a little dog in the doorway. By the way, I lost my little Chihuahua dog of 16 years back in November. Wee girl. And let me tell you something, that was a hard thing. Sharing her mom's spooky sight on Reddit, a daughter said both her parents have spoken about unusual sounds coming from the hallway in recent weeks. She explained how her dad first heard the sound of toenails being scraped along the hardwood floor, followed by her mom claiming to hear the dog's nails being pulled across it just a few days later. She said, "My mom is the biggest skeptic ever. When my dad started telling her that he had on a couple of occasions heard a sound like toenails on hardwood and seen a little white ball float down the hallway, she blew him off for pranking her or imagining things. But then she heard the sound of dog's nails when she was alone and their only other dog was sitting on the couch next to her. Her dog jumped up and ran over to investigate, and the noise stopped." But that's not all, as the daughter adds. She said she saw a little dog in the doorway. Without her glasses on and in the dark, she thought it was her dog, Rosie, who had come to follow her. She walked over to pick her up, and the dog just dropped through the floor, gone. Rosie was still in bed and asleep with Dad. The woman believes she tried to pick up the ghost of her late dad's Chihuahua, who has been showing itself to her and her family. The Chihuahua, who died 2 years ago, was buried with his owner, her dad after passing away just 1 week apart from him. Oh, she's absolutely convinced now that it's her dad and his deeply loved Chihuahua, she added. This is my mom, whose favorite book ever is Demon Haunted World by Carl Sagan. My mom who explains away anything. Seeing her so convinced, she's shaken by her own skepticism. But it's a comfort to think that my pap and his pup might still be around in some way. I've missed them every day. One user said, I've got a ghost cat here at my house. I'm not sure which one it could be since we have had many. It came into the living room and shot across the room and into the kitchen like it was being chased. I was reading a book on my sofa with a cat curled up beside me on the top back of the sofa. She lifted her head and watched the ghost cat run past us. If it was a shadow cat, I haven't seen it since, but I have felt a cat rubbing against my ankle every now and again out of the blue, nothing there. It happens. If cats can be ghosts, so can dogs. Another said, my cat used to always sneeze after she drank water. After she died, we brought her home to bury. We were sitting at the table trying to collect ourselves emotionally, and we heard a sneeze come from the kitchen where her water bowl was kept. It surprised us both, but made us feel so much better. Wow. Believe me, I get it. I get it. And that thing, well, I've got all my, some of them are around here. You know, that thing about the dogs that you hear them on the wood. Yeah. I've heard that like a lot. You know, when I'm saying not for my little Chihuahua that died. As a matter of fact, I have her buried out there. I have a little memorial to my mom, and I buried her right next to it. And as a matter of fact, I have a little shrine with the Immaculate Conception, a stone image of the Virgin out there. I made like a memorial garden for my mom, and I buried her next to it. And I haven't heard anything from and in a way, I don't want to. I don't want to, because it's like, you know, you just want, like, I think like human beings, you want your animal to be at peace. You know, what do they call it in the Rainbow Bridge? And then, you know, you'll hook up later, you know, and right now I've got my 9 to take care of. So anyway, guys, I hope you like the show. I hope you like the Chihuahua ghost story. And like I said, I've got a lot of interesting guests coming on. Go to MiamiGhostChronicles.com for links to either the videos or the podcast versions, podcast without commercial interruptions. Please sign up for my newsletter. You can also find, you know, a way to do that there. And again, got interesting stories, anything, questions, whatever the case might be, please send it to Marlene at MiamiGhostChronicles.com. And I will see you next week. Again, thank you so much for being part of my audience.